So in this video I want to talk about Shorty September. So I've been taking part in Shorty September this month and I'm surprised at how impacting it's been on my reading life. In fact, I think it's fundamentally changed the way I read. It's done that by introducing more than one book at a time for me. So I have been all year following my own personal curriculum for a DIY literature degree. My focus this year was Victorian literature. A lot of the books, like this one, which I've just finished over the last couple of months, are quite chunky books. This is Charlotte Bronte's Shirley. This comes in at well over 600 pages. I've been reading Charles Dickens as well. A lot of those books are mammoths, over 800 pages. And because they're classics, I have been really just focusing on one book at a time, even though in the past really my reading habits are to read more than one book at a time, but recently I haven't. I've just been wanting to focus on the classic that I'm reading and leave it at that until Shorty September came in. Now, with such big books planned, the only way really that I've got a chance to take part in extra events whilst planning in big books like this is to attempt to throw some other books in at the same time. A Shorty September really encouraged me to do that, so that's what I've been doing. It has allowed me to diversify my reading, so I've been able to read books from other time eras, other types of books, other genres. It's encouraged more reading, not into number chasing with my books and reading, but it has been nice to think, oh, I got 2 books read that week, not just one. So it has been nice to up the speed of my reading a little bit, because I have a lot of unread books in my collection, and more importantly, it has allowed me to break my focus away from just my DIY literature degree and into other areas and other events, because there are lots of other events in my first year on BookTube that I do want to take part in. So September is a case in point. There is Shorty September, there's Shake-tember, reading Shakespeare, there's Octember, reading octopus books, there's also the event of Framed, reading art books. All of those I've wanted to take part in, and reading just one book at a time, there's just no time to take part in everything. Shorty September has crept in and whispered, perhaps there is a way that you can do all of this. So there's a lot going on that I want to take part in, and Shorty September I feel has really opened the door and made that easier. So what have I read so far for Shorty September along with Shirley? So I read this over the last couple of months. I finished this in the first 2 weeks of September. Loved this one. But what did I read alongside Shirley? What came in through that Shorty September doorway that's just been opened? So what I decided to do is I decided to balance a classic with not classic works, basically, so I could get that diversity in there. But I did go back to the focus areas of my DIY literature degree. I thought about the fact that I want to study the Gothic, and we're in spooky season now, so I wanted to bring some witchy Gothic books into the mix. Not only is it great for the season, but it does tick that Gothic box for my studies. Also, fairy tales were another area of study for my DIY literature degree, so I went through my books and I looked for fairy tale books that were short. For me, for Shorty September, I've set the bar at books that are 250 pages or less for me. So alongside Shirley, I went to a witch book first of all. It's Gothic, it's witchy. This is a poetry book by Rebecca Tamas called Witch. Feminist poems, poems to do with the occult, ecological poems as well. You've got a whole series of poems which are spell poetry. There's also poetry that starts with the word witch. So you've got witch and the devil. You have got poetry like Witch and the Suffragettes. Witch Scold is another title. I did really enjoy this book. It was just really nice to have something so different. So when I wasn't in the mood for this, I picked this up, and when I wasn't in the mood for this, I picked this up. It's that I loved the most about doing this, about introducing a kind of different genre, different time frame of books and writing. It was nice to swap up the language. It was nice to put some poetry in as well. So I loved that witchy book. Going towards that fairy tale focus, I went for another poetry book as well. I read Nikita Gill's Fierce Fairy Tales and Other Stories to Stir Your Soul. Again, I loved this book. You have the beautiful fact that there's illustrations all the way through, which I really enjoyed as well. There are sections of poems in here which kind of rewrite from a very strongly feminist perspective some of the famous fairy tales. I loved the fact that there was a whole series of fairy tales around the idea of Peter Pan. So you've got one entitled Why Tinkerbell Quit Anger Management, Boy Lost, and you can see Peter Pan's flying ship there. You've got a poem called Wendy and Child's Play, and through the book you do get sections like that. So there's a section on Little Red Riding Hood and wolves. There's a section on like Fairy Godmother and Cinderella and tales like that. And I do really love that rewriting aspect of these poems. Like in this poem Boy Lost, you've got this really powerful writing. His father's temper is a beast so powerful that a boy made of paper bones barely held together cannot fight him. He hides in his room. He lives for a boy at sunset. Hope made him into a human being. So it takes some of the themes of the fairy tales and the stories that we know and love, and it really does some beautifully profound things with them. Like in this poem called The Shapeshifter, you've got a verse that says, women learn early how to shed whole selves but still make it look pretty, as if ugly is a crueler destiny than death. So some great poems in there, which made again another lovely counter read to Shirley. I did get a DNF. Thinking about Gothic reading, I found this tiny little book which comes in at just over 100 pages, which I thought would be great to lead into Gothic reading. Wuthering Heights, according to Spike Milligan. Now, Wuthering Heights is one of my all-time favourite Gothic reads, but oh boy, I could not do this. I didn't like the crassness of the humour. It was very crude and rude in places, and misogynistic as well, and I just thought, no, I think I got about 20 pages in and thought I just can't do it. So unfortunately, Wuthering Heights, according to Spike Milligan, was a DNF for me. His humour, I think, is from another time, and it was just not my humour whatsoever. And then the last Shorty book I read, which came in at just under 250 pages, was this book, which is part of a duology which I found in a charity shop. So this is a witchy book called Witch Child by Celia Rees. Now, this book was shortlisted for the Guardian Prize for Children's Fiction in 2001, but do not let the fact that it's a children's book put you off reading it. This really did not read like a children's book, and I absolutely loved it. Make the case for why you should read Witch Child. The structure of it is absolutely amazing. It begins right at the very start with this kind of typeface page, laying out the fact that the following pages are parts of a journal that were found page by page sewn into a quilt, which was made in the colonial period. And the premise is that this quilt was found. Within it were all these separate pages which they finally pieced together to make this diary, and the whole book is written as diary entries. It's just fantastic, and they write about that as if that's actually fact, that this isn't a fiction book, this is actually a historical document that was found in a quilt, and you actually get the process of the pages being sewn into the quilt written about in the book. So it's very kind of, you can't quite work out what's real and what isn't real, and that structure continues right to the very end, where there is an afterword at the end of the book with a fake email address that asks for more information. If anybody has more information about the quilt or the people mentioned, they're trying to piece together the history. I thought that was a really great premise for the structure of the book, and it just made it so interesting to read. So all of the diary entries are kind of collated into 4 different sections. You've got Journey 1, Journey 2, you've got New World, you've got Wilderness, and you've got Settlements. That's 5 different sections of the book. So this story charts the story of Mary, who is granddaughter of a witch. Now the book opens with Mary's grandmother being hung for witchcraft. At the point that she's hung, Mary is whisked away. She is wrapped in a rich lady's cloak and put onto a horse and carriage and taken away from this threatening scene where they are threatening to come after Mary next. So there's mystery right from the start. Who is this lady? Why is she involved? Why has she paid passage for Mary to board a ship and travel across the ocean to America? And that's exactly what happens in the second part of the book. Journey 2 is based on her passage across the ocean on this ship, where she is taken in with a group of church founders who are the second half of a church leaving England to go to America. It's a Puritan church that she's involved with. The midwife and wise woman of the healing church quickly takes Mary under her wing, and we can feel the witchcraft vibes growing. We meet the characters on the ship from this church. We see the mean girls that are spreading rumours, which I think is very much a part of the witch rumour mill going on. That passage from England to a puritanical America really reminds me of Elizabeth Gaskell's Lois the Witch. We see that in Lois the Witch. It also reminded me of the format of the story of Slewfoot as well. Both of those books I've read this year, so that felt like a really familiar story, bringing in the history around Salem and the witch trials. So when they arrive, we get to the section called New World, where we see the distrust of natives and of the Indians in the New World. Again, that has real parallels with those other stories as well. When the church arrives, they realise that their church, the other half of the church that went before them, didn't settle in Salem, but they've carried on out into the wilderness, and they need to find them basically. So they go on a journey through the wilderness, which is the next section of the book. In that section, I really loved the writing about this immense giant forest that was there. The forest really does become a character in its own right in that book. So if you like things like that, you will love this book. The idea of the forest as this place of darkness and of mystery and of magic, somewhere where somebody prone to witchcraft would be pulled to. It also sets up that idea of that the Indians and the natives that live within the forest are othered because of the suspicion around magic and the mystery that nature inspires in the church leaders. They soon very quickly ban people from entering the forest. They deem that anybody entering the forest may be doing devil worship. They accuse the natives living in the forest of being devil worshippers as well. The forest is this mystical place that is just incredible, but it does act as a tool to separate the people arriving and the natives, and to create a doorway really for colonization, which I think is a really interesting take. Mary is very much drawn to the forest. She has a job of collecting herbs in the forest anyway, for the woman, the midwife that has taken her under her wing, and through those journeys to collect herbs, she does make friends with the Indian population within the forest, who claim to her that she is part wolf. There is shape shifting in this book as well, so if you love that idea of shape shifting, there are wolves involved. You can see that shape-shifting element within her eyes. Her dead grandmother's spirit has followed in the shape of a hare, so there's all shape-shifting elements within that as well. She is told by the Indians that they can see the wolf in her eyes, her yellow eyes, and there is something about eyes and women witnessing each other's journeys with their eyes, and the witch circle and the coven, and which is also part of this book, which I loved. When the ship leaves England, it is watched over from the shoreline by a number of witches in different places, and I just loved that aspect of women witnessing other women's lives. So that was absolutely fabulous. We also see a counterbalance of the really strict rules of Puritan society set against the freedom of a witchcraft practice, and we also see the mean girls coming into play in the rumour mill of those days. It's great, but I think above all what really stood out for me was that idea of the forest and the suspicions that forests could create in people's minds. Mary has no suspicion, she has no fear of the forest. She understands that the people who live in the forest are not devil worshipping, they are just treading lightly through the world. They know how to tread lightly. It's actually physically manifested in this book, but the Indians, you can never hear them coming. Mary can sense them, her body tingles when they're around, but she can never hear them. That's how lightly they tread. Whereas the colonizers of the new church, they are like a herd of buffalo in the woods. So just that writing of the woods is just so wonderful in here. And we hear the awe in which the forest is written about when they first lay their eyes on it. It says the children no longer played and ran about. They returned to their mothers, clutching at their skirts. Women turned to their menfolk, who stared as round-eyed as their children. This was the wild wood, greater than any that we had heard of in a fireside story. To enter was to step into a realm of mystery, and who knew what forces held sway in its dark depths. That writing of them coming up to the line of the forest, just so great. It reminded me of Tolkien and some of the woods in Tolkien. So those were the first 4 Shorty September books that I read or attempted to read alongside Shirley. So then I threw a second classic in for September. Again, this fits for Shorty September because this is the shortest Anne Radcliffe book that I own, a Sicilian romance, and this comes in at 199 pages, so one page under 200. One of my DIY literature degree goals this year, studying Gothic literature, was to get a feel for the works of Anne Radcliffe. So I've read the Italian, I have now read the Romance of the Forest, and a Sicilian romance was the third book I read, and I equally loved this. But in keeping with that idea of Shorty September and reading more than one book at a time, I set it against again a more modern book. So classic and modern really works for me. This again is just under 250 pages, so this again also fits for Shorty September. This is Claire Coder's Woman Eating, which is a really interesting take on a vampire novel. I thought, let's put some vampire books in for spooky season. Let's stick to the gothic. This is set in modern times. You have got Lydia, who has just sent her mum, who is also a vampire, to a nursing home. Throughout Lydia's life, her mum has never let her kill anybody. She's always got pig's blood for them to eat. She's always been responsible for getting the food in for her and Lydia to eat. Her mum has always set up in her mind that vampirism is something to be truly ashamed of. It is a disease, and that you should be totally ashamed of the food and the food you need and the food that you eat. And I think in that premise there are some really interesting parallels in here to do with food and shame and body dysmorphia and eating disorders. This is a book that I really want to reread to kind of grab and wrap my head around that parallel theme between vampirism and shame around food. So really interesting read, this one. If you are interested in vampire fiction and you've not read this one, it is just really fascinating. We see Lydia when she starts to struggle to find blood by herself. She starts to find dying animals, and one of the fascinating things about this book is the blood that she ingests holds the story of the animal, and she can feel as the blood slowly works its way through her system, through that nourishment, she also gets the story of the animal through the nourishment. So that was really layered as well. Like, the food is never just food, there is a story embedded in it, all wrapped up in a parcel of shame. So loads of different layers for reading this one, and again, these two very different, but they worked brilliantly. So another 2 for Shorty September. And then for another one that I've read for Shorty September, this is the shortest book from the Candies shortlist I'm reading. Hotel de Lac comes in at about 180 pages. I've just finished it. It also fits for the read good prompt of Sapphire September, because it is something blue. It's got a blue cover. This was really interesting, very slow, very gentle. People in a hotel, some outrage and some scandal, and a writer piecing together all the characters in the hotel as she hides away from scandal of her own making. It was slow, it was gentle, it wasn't a particular 5-star. I liked it, I didn't dislike it. Real middle of the road for me this one was. It's more like a 3-star book, but I'm glad I read it. And I have been kind of trying to finish Pericles, which again would fit for Shorty September. Classic, more modern book. Pericles by Shakespeare. This also is for Shaptember. What on earth am I reading? Shakespeare has the power to shock. Still, after all these years, I find this incredibly shocking. I still need to finish it. I will go into more detail when I do. So that's what I've read so far for Shorty September. Other books I would like to get to. I would love to get to the shortest of my Charles Dickens books, which is Hard Times. It might happen, it might not. I also really want to get to God is an Octopus for October. This comes in at just under 250 pages as well. And I'm going to quickly show you what I've got in my cupboard of shorter books as well, which I'd also like to get to before the end of the year. So let me take you down and I'll show you. So up here in my big desk in my bedroom, you can see what I did alongside all my Dickens leather-bound books. I just went round trying to find some shorter books just to keep doing this towards the end of the year. So I've got things like A Psalm for the Wild Built. I've got some Paulo Coelho books, The Alchemist. I've also got here Veronica Decides to Die. I've got a witchy play for more of that witch lit fiction. Some more early Gothic, Charlotte Dacre's The Floyer or The Moor, The Wide Sargasso Sea, that's Gothic. I found a couple of Patrick Suskins in the charity shop, again great for Gothic reading. So I've got Perfume and also this tiny version of The Pigeon. I've got this H.P. Lovecraft, which you can see would be great for October, with the focus on fairy tales. I've got Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber to finish reading. For Shaptember, I've got Anthology. This is a little poetry book about Anne Shakespeare, Anne Hathaway. I did get a couple of plays out, Macbeth for Witchiness and King John, because I want to do some framed reading around the idea of Gothic art, and there's a link with King John and Gothic art, but I just don't think I'm going to get to all of this. In this pile I've got some more fairy tale poetry. Let's go from the top, it might be easier. So I've got Von Fran's interpretation of fairy tales, that's non-fiction. I've got a second-hand little vampire book I found. I've got a book about liminal space, which is kind of Gothic. The Living and the Dead, an exploration of the boundaries between the worlds of life and death. I've got The Girl of Ink and Stars, which has been on my bookcase for forever. I've got a Brian Bates book, which kind of fits Shorty September. I've got the rest of the stories in this Charlotte Perkins Gilman book, The Yellow Wallpaper and Other Writings. I have read The Yellow Wallpaper this year and loved it and would like to read more of her stuff. I've started reading this one. This is non-fiction. This is Gothic Fiction, A Reader's Guide to Essential Criticism. I am currently also reading Shakespeare's Wife, which doesn't fit Shorty September. What else have I got? 39 Steps. There's the other Paolo Coelho book. I've got the one-act play by Oscar Wilde of Salome. I've got a very spooky looking book here. This is Doris Lessing, The Fifth Child. I've got one from my Booker Prize pile. Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These. I've got a kids book, Night Flying by Rita Murphy. I've got a little novello by my friend Rumour Haven called Ghosted, which is going to be perfect for spooky season. And then this is another fairy tale poetry book. And then balanced up on here, this is a book of short stories by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which I haven't got to yet. So you can see I have got lots and lots of possibilities there, which of course I am not going to get to just this month, but because it has transformed my reading and I am enjoying doing this double aspect of two books at the same time, these are staying there as my potential possibilities to keep doing this. So I'm very grateful for Shorty September so far, because it has really changed my reading and the way I read. So that's it, guys. Lots of books I'm enjoying in September. Hopefully I will get to videos for Shaptember as well, and Framed, and also October. If not in September, then it might be that they come later in the year. But I am enjoying my reading, and I am enjoying watching what everybody else is reading as well on BookTube. So thanks for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.